And we're back. All right. So the true episode 1 of the podcast.
The one, the only.
Yeah. There was never a pilot episode.
Never
there
an
was no
episode 0.
Yeah, there was no conspiratorial talk. Okay, so today we will be talking about a rather broad topic, but I think we both in our own time came to the same conclusion, so we do have a general consensus about the failures of technology. And so what I would like to do is open up by reading a quote from Ernst Jünger, which I pulled up the other day. This is from his book, The Glass Bees, which I think I gave you a copy of that at one point, right?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. It's a really good read. It's a fictional book about a... well, I would assume he's an army captain because he was in the cavalry. But he returns home from what would have been a fictionalized world war, and he realizes that he as a cavalryman has no place in society because of these glass bees, which are, in modern terms, they would be like nanobots, and they do everything for everyone, right? And so he loses his sense of purpose because of their ability to just do everything. So here's the quote. Human perfection and technological perfection are incompatible. If we strive for one, we must sacrifice the other. There is, in any case, a parting of the ways. Whoever realizes this will do cleaner work one way or the other. Technological perfection strives towards the calculable, human perfection towards the incalculable. Perfect mechanisms, around which, therefore, stands an uncanny but fascinating halo of brilliance, evoke both fear and titanic pride, which will be humbled not by insight, but only by catastrophe. The quote continues on to be much more elaborate, but I would like to stop there, and really I'd like to focus this conversation on the ideas of human perfection and technological perfection. So as we read about that, he said human perfection is incalculable. So essentially, the way I see that is that it's ever-changing, just as like cultures change and grow and, revolt and regress and return, that's all about aesthetics, what's morally acceptable, what is viewed as beautiful. Is it intelligence, or is it the body, or is it how you live? And then you have the idea of technological perfection, which he said was calculable. And so what is technological perfection? And you have to have some sort of presupposition, because what do you mean by technological perfection? Do you mean that technology is so advanced that we as humans live in leisure? Or is it limited enough for us to have meaning, like so we can do something in it? Or is it even relative to us at all? Is technological perfection beyond human? And so I have some notes about what I kind of thought as technology as a false indicator of progress. And that is to say that technology is a false indicator of human progress. Technology is progressing on its own, whether or not we progress or not. Our social progress is almost the antithesis of technological progress. Because as technology is getting better, it's building upon itself, it's, in a sense, getting stronger, more self-reliant. Humanity is going the opposite way. In fact, we're getting weaker. There's all these tests or studies done that show, like, fertility is going down just across the board. More diseases are coming about that we can't do anything about. Just social, economic crises. And we're not going to the moon anymore. Realistically, yeah, we're not striving for anything. So our progress is just decadence. Realistically, in the last 100 years, what is progress is actually decadence in historical context. The aristocracy is gone. All nobility is practically gone. There is no study of the classical arts. It's all gone. So what are we progressing in exactly? And so I also had the idea that technology is, as it's progressing, it's kind of dichotomizing itself, or splitting rather, just from nature, right? And so it's actually driving a wedge between humans and nature, which of course we are a part of. There's nothing special about us other than we have climbed Mount Improbable to one of its many peaks. Not intelligently designed.
And we're a child of nature.
Yes, exactly. We are a product of nature. So I wrote this. Human understanding of the world is so minimal. We can measure, and assign arbitrary numerical values, etc., but our greatest failure is our inability to associate together what we consider to be separate systems. So, for example, we didn't think that the sun had any impact on the Earth in terms of magnetic fields or, just radiation in general. Generally, people just knew it was hot when the sun was out,
It comes up and I'm warm.
Right, exactly. And so I said, in fact, our understanding is so wholly lacking that when we try to undo any damage or want to beautify the environment, we actually make it uglier and less functional than it was before. I mean, think about, you have a forest, that entire ecosystem. Well, we kind of want to flatten the land out and, make it farmable. Well, then the farmland floods all the time and it's unproductive and, it's ugly. It's just ugly. Right. There's something off about it. Or cutting down a bunch of trees to make a park. It's kind of like the antithesis of things. Or when we realize that, hey, we've polluted this area, let's try to build it again. We plant trees in parallel rows from each other, and it's a monoculture, and it ends up all dying, and all the trees never grow beyond 2 or 3 feet.
Right.
So... we make inorganic what is organic already, right? A wild apple or a rudimentarily domesticated one is perfectly edible on its own, right? A wild apple I'm talking about. But we had to go and ruin it with pesticides, GMOs, etc., as if without those things it's not edible. Right. There are things out there that we're making better, but we're not. It's not better.
Almost like we're making it better just for us against nature.
Right, and it's not even good for us. Right. That's when I said all those studies were coming out that testosterone's going down, sperm count's going down, just human fertility in general is going down. Not just sexual libido, but the just male strength and stuff. Whew. Don't get me into that. I got to focus on the topic here. But by changing or perfecting a part of the system, what we're effectively doing is undermining and eliminating the perfection of the system as a whole. Right? So by compartmentalizing and defining one aspect, so say Earth as a closed system, right? We're often missing and pillaging the much larger picture, whereas it's, oh, hey, the moon is actually affecting the Earth, and oh, so is the sun, and oh, so is Saturn.
Right.
Not in any astrological, but astronomical terms. So when we obsess over function, we neglect the form, and vice versa. When we neglect the form, or when we focus on the form, we're neglecting the function of something.
It's even in the saying, form over function, or function over form.
Right. So that right there, in and of itself, I think we need to look into maybe for another podcast.
I would agree with
form
that.
and function.
Yes.
What exactly are those things? So I guess we could dive into some Greek studies.
I'm going to make a note of that. We should do that next.
Yeah. So
function versus form.
And recently, we've both seen films that have aesthetics but are lacking in the symbology. Which before this podcast, we were actually just talking about symbology. Right.
Every Marvel movie ever.
I was more so thinking along the lines of Star Wars. Everyone has, and Lord of the Rings as well, but I don't think you've followed the
I'm not
new
as
thing.
into that, no.
Right, but Star Wars we can both kind of agree on. The first 6, created by George Lucas, who went to school and studied under Joseph Campbell, probably one of the greatest students and professors of mythology, like global
Just mythology in general.
Understood symbology and its importance and the art of storytelling, whereas in the newest films,
Right.
The newest iteration of Star Wars is just wholly lacking in symbology, and what it actually is doing is not calling back to something archetypal.
Yes.
It's
that's
calling
it.
back to
Yes.
Star Wars nostalgia, which
Yes.
is like not very deep.
Right.
It's not multi-layered, and so that's why it's a fun watch. The aesthetics are great. What we can do with computers, especially Lucasfilm,
Right.
what they can do is amazing, and
Right.
it's entertaining to watch because they are some of your favorite characters doing cool things. But it's like the gravitas, the depth of something just is not there. The attractiveness of it's not there.
And that's all it is it's just trying to appeal to you, not through an archetypal story, but just it's trying to grab at your nostalgia.
Right.
That's all it's trying to do from you, is to surface your nostalgia so that you enjoy it and you pay for it.
Right.
There's no underlying archetypal story or meaning there, because we all know the little guy takes on the big guy and wins. We all know that story. It's been told 1,000 times, but Star Wars found a way to do it in a new way. And throw in these strange, alien characters and all these new creatures that no one had ever seen. And that's what made it interesting. It was a story that we could feel. We've heard it before. We've seen it happen in history. And they found a way to put it in space. And it was well told. But the new ones, they lack that, because that wasn't the motivation for making them in the first place.
Well said. This last sentence of my first note for my introduction. By abstracting what is real into just simple numbers and letters, we're losing the meaning. Now, I know that's kind of getting into the conversation that we had before, but that last sentence kind of reminded me of what Socrates said, where he writes nothing down because writing is just a prison for the mind. Right. And so, yeah, that kind of abstraction that's not in verbal dialogos, discussion between two people, right? If by writing things down, you are losing the meaning, but that might be counter to what I said before the podcast, that when we speak and write, there are secondary, tertiary, and I don't even
Quaternary.
Quaternary. Yeah, I actually don't know what 4 is. Tetrary?
I believe it's quaternary.
Quaternary? Yeah, that actually sounds right. Levels of meaning.
Right.
So, who knows? But I do agree that by abstracting what's real into more round numbers and more, it's just easier to understand when Earth isn't actually, let's just make Earth into a perfect sphere. Let's make the moon into a perfect sphere. That's when we sphere. That's when we start getting these weird connections between things.
Right.
Like, Earth is a perfect sphere, but we have 365 days.
Right.
But that's also at the rate we're spinning. So, all of that to say that what we understand of the world is so minimal that when we inject technology into things, we're fouling it up, right? So we want to make the world a better place or easier for us to live in. We're actually making it harder for ourselves. I mean, the most common example would be the amount of pollution we're putting in the planet, be it through fossil fuel or by just throwing a piece of plastic into the ocean. Like, we're making things harder for ourselves because of technology. So at what point was there or will there ever be technological equilibrium where humans can strive and do their thing, and where technology can serve its purpose.
Right.
Because if technology continues to grow, as we can already kind of see, it's subjugating nature. Technology subjugates us.
Right.
We are limited basically to what we're allowing technology to do for us. And in some ways, we're limited to the function and form of technology, right? Think about a lot of the work being done today is a lot of technical stuff. I mean, I'm talking not just digital banking, but like everything revolves around. We're kind of limited based on the... Does that make any sense, what I'm trying to say?
Keep going.
Yeah, so technology allows us to do things in greater volume.
Yes.
Right?
Scale.
Exactly. So it's limiting us in the sense that it's creating either false dichotomies or that it... Well, we're stuck in an office.
A cubicle, even.
A cubicle, even. It limits the way that we think, especially when we can only think, like right now, well, what do we do without fossil fuels?
Right.
That's not that fossil fuel itself is a form of technology, but our technology has revolved around that. We never even thought about Tesla's ideas or anything like that, if they have any credence at all, because it was just, nah, we're just going to do fossil fuels.
Right.
And so technology is limiting in the sense that we think our technology is the only version of things. But maybe I should back off that statement.
Well, I can see where you're.
It's not a formulated idea. I just thought of it in me trying to just on the spot summarize.
But in a way, it essentially it does. It clouds our view because with the technology that we have, we're therefore disincentivized to make new ones. Because if it works now and it's profitable enough, then we're just going to keep doing that.
Right. And technology right now, at least, I don't know if it ever could be, but technology right now is only observant of the closed systems that we allow it to observe.
Right.
Right. And so a lot of discoveries are being made by accident right now instead of intentionally, which is kind of funny to think about because you'd think technology would be it would be able to see it and tell us what it is, but that was so vague. I don't even think that made any sense. I wish I would have thought of that before you came, but that just hit me just now.
Well, I mean, it's good to. I mean, we put it out there. It's a nebula right now, but eventually it'll form into something. Because, kind of like you said, words are
words are hard.
Words are a prison of the mind. Well, they're also a snapshot of the mind. If you put the words out there, it's a snapshot of the nebula that we've got going on with that idea.
Technology is limiting human potential because technology is an extension of man. It's like looking at roots or branches of a tree, right? It may be going the wrong way, right? That's our limitation, is that it might reach a dead end, right? But we have put so much of our effort into that, we forgot to branch out to anything else.
Right.
And so it's kind of like, I don't even know how to put it. Someone who stocks up on just one item this whole time. Like he buys gold and silver all the time for the apocalypse, and then the apocalypse happens and no one wants gold or silver. And I think that's kind of what we're doing. We're investing so much into technology that we don't even realize it's, like I said earlier, the wedge between us and nature. So is it like we're really stomping on our own umbilical cord in a sense. Not saying that we should be naked and in the woods and that's peak humanity.
I think it's more of a situation where we need to be more wary of what we do and what effects it's going to have on us as a species in the long term. Because like you were saying before we started this, I mean, we had talked a little bit just to prepare each other, prepare ourselves for the conversation we're having now.
Right.
But something that you had mentioned was that when we have this technology, where was the direction I was going with that? We can't keep up with the technology that we have.
Right.
We were evolved in a natural environment, in an environment that was, evolved on its own, separate from us. We evolved up as a part of it. But now we have developed technology to the extent that we quite literally alter our own environment and divorce ourselves from the process of evolution. I mean, that can't be good for us in the long term. Or maybe it is. But we should ask ourselves that question before we say, oh yeah, Snapchat's a great idea.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows what role social media will have on our brains in 100 years. And it's crazy.
Right, yeah. And unfortunately, you could never do that because then you would be limiting ideas,
Right.
and that is a very conservative way of looking at
Yeah.
things, and, that has to be appreciated. I think that's why civilizations in general just were like, hey, the elders know what's up. Why don't we
Exactly, yes.
listen to what they have
Yeah.
to say, and, like, their wisdom will keep us alive,
Right.
or sane, at least.
Because I'll say this and then I'll let you get back to your point. As a young person, I feel, I see this idea and I don't quite agree with it because it doesn't quite work out for me or what have you. And I'm young and virile and I want to change things. But the wisdom of the past is what is supposed to prevent us from doing so. Because if it was up to young people for everything, we wouldn't really have much of anything, would we?
Right, and that's... I think Jordan Peterson's entire career recently is based on that.
Yes.
Idea is that, hey, there are these really old stories that are trying to tell us something, and you guys talk about these stories all the time, but you don't actually know what they mean. And so his thing was he's extrapolating the actual hey, just do this, don't do that.
Right.
That's what this is saying. And people are like, oh, I've always known that, but I've never actually heard it put it into words. Because you've always watched it illustrated.
Exactly.
Because you're only paying attention to the first layer of language. But no, exactly what you were saying is that we're not assimilating tech as it develops. And so we don't even integrate technology into our culture before we move on. In fact, we are a culture of technology where, I mean, that's the Faustian, I don't want to get into Faust and all that stuff, but that's exactly what we're talking about, that Faustian bargain where it's I'm just going to sacrifice my soul in order to get power.
Right.
And it's are we really going to do that? Is that
I
is that where we want to go?
We're already in that process, I think.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm a doomer. I'm there.
Doomer.
Yeah. It's gotten to a point where we're so far steeped in. The only thing that I can think that would turn this ship around is Pentti Linkola and Ted Kaczynski said it. It was destroy all technology made in the last 150 years. Now, granted, they said 100 years, but that was almost 50 years ago. Right. And so, Ted Kaczynski was more like 30 years ago. But, the same thing, Linkola was saying this years ago as well. But, in the last 150 years, all technology gone, go. Basically undo the Industrial Revolution. How do you do that?
You can't.
The only thing that I can think of that would remotely take us back anywhere near the Industrial Revolution is an EMP. But at that point, you can still redo steam and coal.
Right.
You could just redo that immediately.
Right.
And that's so what do we do? Do we just go back to the Middle Ages? And what point in the Middle Ages do we go back to? Because, screw democracy. We can throw that and the baby out the the baby and the bathwater, all of it.
The baby and the democratic bathwater.
Yeah. Based. Do we undo the printing press? Do we at what point do we actually go back? And so it's all right, well, if taking technology out isn't necessarily the most viable thing right now, because without technology we wouldn't be doing this podcast.
It's true.
And so there are benefits to having it. There is a use for technology, and obviously like I said, how far would you go back? Because a rock is freaking technology to an ape,
right.
And
they use them.
Yes, they use them a lot. That being said, If you have notes prepared,
Yes.
which I think it seems that you do, we're going to move on to, like, that was an extended introduction into a conversation, but at this point, I'm just going to let you read through your notes. And
So the topic for today was going to be about technology and just in general how it has affected us as a species. What do we do with it? How do we go from there? And the direction that I took with it, while yours was more literal, mine is a little bit more spiritual. So we've lost our ability to strive. I mean, there's a high degree to which we used to strive. We had to strive to live. We had to strive to be comfortable. We had to strive to eat, to sleep, to drink. We had to strive. And, to strive, to survive, the need, the desire to continue so that our genes continue, it requires effort. It requires work. It requires achievement. I mean, the definition of to strive is to put effort into obtaining or achieving a goal. Whatever your goal is, we're wired to achieve things. We're wired to achieve goals. And part of the problem that we already kind of touched on is that when we have technology to make things easy for us, say I'm trying to communicate with someone, I can open up my phone, text them, and boom, they know exactly what I needed to know or what they needed to know. Or if I want to wash myself, I walk into the bathroom, turn a knob, water at a preferred temperature comes out, and I can bathe myself in comfort. It's something that people even 200 years ago couldn't quite fathom, much less 2,000 years ago or 20,000 years ago. But there's no telling how much that has affected us as a species, because taking another step back, we're wired to achieve. We're wired to obtain, to achieve, to conquer, to not necessarily to dominate or to conquer, other people, but to dominate something, to achieve. That's the point that I'm trying to stress. And technology has kind of stunted our exercise of that. There's no telling how much that is going to affect us as creatures. And I think the bigger issue extrapolating from that is our spirit. I mean, people today are more depressed than they've ever been. I mean, we've got, or at least we're told they are. They're on all kinds of medications. People all the time are saying, I don't feel like there's any meaning in my life. Especially young men now. I mean, both of us are young men. We both have felt that at one point or another. And, I work with other young men. I work with older men. Everyone, at some point in their lives, has struggled with meaning. Or, what is my purpose? What am I supposed to do? Technology has made life so easy for us, such that, well, what even is that question? I don't need to ask that question. I can do everything I need to do easily. I can go to work, I get some paper, and I can buy whatever I need to buy. There's no strival anymore to strive. And I think that is going to have a long-term effect on our health as a species, our mental health as a species. I mean, we have to struggle in order to grow. So to flourish just as a human being, you have to overcome something. We see it in, just like in Star Wars, or any sort of story that you want to watch that has to do with victory or winning or exploration. That's all it is. Hell, Indiana Jones. It's an adventure. There is no adventure anymore because life is just simple. You do this, you do that. Sometimes you get drunk on the weekends, you go home and you do it over again. Rinse, repeat. I do that, and it's droning. So, like I said, technology has stunted this reality, and we've removed ourselves from the environment that made us. That's a problem. Not so much that, like you said, like we had already touched on, not so much that we need to, run the clock back 150 years and deprive ourselves of luxuries, but also we need to be aware of the fact that we have to have at least something to do. Because not often in modern life do you have a goal that you have to work hard to achieve that requires either your strength or your mental strength or what have you. It's easy in comparison to what previous people have done. I mean, sure, if you have a homework assignment, you might have to bust your ass for 2 hours to get it in at 11:59, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking more of you are building a fence. Your dad asks you, hey, I need some help building this. You go out and it's a project you work on with your dad. You build a fence, you paint it, and you stand back and you look at your work and you're like, wow, I did that. I'm proud of it. It gives you a good feeling. You achieved something. That doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen as much as it used to anymore. And I think that's part of why people are losing their innately adventurous, exploratory spirit. And technology is at part the root of that. Some of it has to do with the power of money. Some of it has to do with the totally devoid value culture that we have. I mean, it's just a vapid, empty abyss of a culture is what we could call it, just globally right now, at least in the Western world. And that I would say is the crux of it. There needs to be a social and a psychological change in how we create technology and how we use technology and how we interact with each other with technology in order for us to have some handle on what's going to happen to our health in the future. That's essentially where I got with my notes.
Okay. I was taking notes kind of as you were writing. So, I think towards the beginning, you said that you had taken it in more of a spiritual route. And I noticed throughout you had mentioned quite a few things that actually took place in the physical realm, right? Like we were saying, assimilating tech as it evolves before moving on.
Right.
You started and finished with that, which I thought was encapsulating your whole argument.
Right.
Really is like, we don't even know what to do with the technology that we create other than its function. Right. We don't understand its form. And what underlying functions it'll end up having. And these are more like consequences. The Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for mankind. But no, there are secondary consequences. There are just unknown consequences, I should say, because every system that we interact with is complex, multifaceted.
Oh, it's incredibly, especially now.
We don't even understand what the hell is going on in the world. So who are we to really go out? I mean, putting a shovel in the ground is not just moving dirt, displacing dirt. It's like there's a whole vast swath of things. You just cut into the mycelial layer that was, organizing the decomposition of this environment to rebuild a new forest or something, and you put a house right there. We interact with the environment in ways that we don't necessarily know, and we can't predict. Right. Because you can't you can't tag every single molecule. Right. So who knows where it's going, what it was going to do, our interaction, if you want to think about the butterfly effect.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah, our interaction with the environment is, it's immeasurable.
Right.
The damage or the benefit that we can do, because also we do benefit the environment in ways by moving some of these resources to areas that didn't have it before, and then all of a sudden.
And population control too. I mean, just where we live, deer can be a problem. You have to kill off the diseased ones, or there may be too many bucks. They're going to start raping all the does. You can't have that. And so when we practice population control, we can thin out the herd such that they don't destroy themselves by eating up all the food and they all starve.
Right. And the spike in the deer population is of consequence to the human spike in population and the necessity for cornfields and things like that to feed them. And it's like, we can go back and forth like this whole time. Well, humans actually came here because there were deer here. And then it's just like a back and forth all the time, and you're like, okay, obviously it's not like a chicken before the egg kind of thing.
Right.
Eventually there were no humans here,
Right.
and there were no deer here either,
Right.
so they're not exactly the cause. What is the cause for things moving around? We don't know, right? You also mentioned that humans no longer struggle because of the advancements in technology, and we haven't really identified another struggle to go on, another quest, we should have had something on the moon by now.
Right.
We should have had, Werner von Braun wrote
Right.
the Mars Project like back in the 50s, I
Right.
think, or maybe 70s. I can't remember.
Well, that actually goes back to kind of like before this conversation we're having now. We had touched on the Cold War. I mean,
Yeah.
we had a clear struggle there. We were fighting the Russians. We had to do something. We had to beat them. And as a result, some of the greatest advancements in technology in human history ever, period, happened.
Right.
It was that simple.
Which is funny because you think about the Cold War and the space race, but it was a common struggle, which the struggle was getting to space. Yeah. Like the Russians and the Americans are both trying to get, that is our common struggle.
Right.
And so the competition between us doing that led us to success in both areas. The Russians were the first to space. We were the first to the moon.
Right.
Or so they say.
It's really interesting, actually, that you bring that up, because I had never actually thought of that before. It was a common struggle. We had the same struggle against each other, competing to get to the moon, juxtaposed with us struggling to not kill each other at the same time. So the greatest... I would say that the moon landing is probably the crowning achievement of modern technology. That is absolutely amazing. And it happened at a time where we also were capable of quite literally destroying ourselves.
Oh, we were there a few
at
times.
the push of a button.
Yeah, we were literally there a few times.
It's so interesting that our greatest advancement is juxtaposed with our end, potentially. I think that's hilarious, actually.
Yeah, I've never really thought of it as a common struggle until I said it, but it really was. There's nothing. Which I think about it in a much simpler term, right? You're trying to get the gold medal for running a track race, right? And you're not friend, but you've known him because you've raced against him so many times. It's more of a healthy, competitive, athletic relationship, right? Well, you're obviously pushing each other because you want to be just an inch ahead of your friend, and he wants to be an inch ahead of you, which is causing you to strive greater.
Right.
And so it's like you're trying to do better than him, but your goal isn't to crash into each other, because then you both slow down. The goal is to actually get to the finish line.
Right.
And so I think that's a very interesting way to look at strivalism. I think we might need to implement that kind of thought. We've said competition, strive, struggle, and if you've ever taken like a English literature class, you learn the elements of a story, right? And so when you get to the plot, well, what is it? Is it man versus man? Is it man versus nature? Man versus God himself? Things like that. I think we have to realize that if strivalism, which is what this podcast is essentially about, all of these will be about, is kind of fleshing out the idea of strivalism. If we want to make strivalism into a paradigm, we're obviously going to have an illustrative layer of it.
Right.
Because we could write "thou shalt do" all of these and maybe gain some people, but I think the meaning would be lost. And meaning, what does that mean?
Exactly.
You're looking for a deeper layer in something.
Right.
You might not understand the surface layer, so you want more for clarification, for understanding, so that you can digest, internalize, and then, photosynthesize, whatever you want to call it. You gain this, it's nutrients for your brain, it's good num-nums, you turn that into energy, and then you expel that energy in ways, in growth, in pollination, and things like that. I'm thinking in terms of plants right now, but
The way that
I think that's a wonderful thing to think of.
Yeah, the way that when you said what is meaning or what does that even mean, I was like, well, what does it mean? And just in my head, my way of making that make sense is when life comes full circle. So if I can think of something, what gives it meaning is finding a way to connect it to something else and how that connects to something else and so on and so forth until you get this whole web of things that are all interconnected somehow. At the end, it still connects back to where you started. I think that it can be the meaning.
That's the hero's journey.
Exactly.
You go about all these tasks in these different areas of life, and you end up back home. Everything's back to normal.
And you've grown from it too.
Exactly.
You have flourished in yourself and found some sort of connection with other things that are also connected, and those things are connected, and it just doesn't end. Right. But being a part of that interconnectedness, I think that is what a deeper meaning is for most things. I would apply that to everything, really. But that's meaning.
I think I found that same sense of satisfaction when I was at basic training, right? So I hate doing this. I hate going back and be like, yeah, basic training. Because, I went to basic training for about 6 months, right? I think so. I forget what it was. It was only 12 weeks, so 4 months.
Yeah.
Right? That's a lot. I think it's 22 weeks now or something, the infantry OSIT is. But anyhow, that's besides the point. At the beginning, when you go into the dining hall, mm-hmm. right, you grab 2 cups and you kind of hold them abreast, mm-hmm. You're like a Lego man's hands, right?
But touching your chest.
Yeah, and you grab the 2 cups and then you just kind of hold them to your chest, right? It was one of the last weeks of basic training. We go to a grenade range, mm-hmm. and we get handed our grenades, and we hold them like this. And it was oh, that's why we're doing this.
Exactly.
And then they teach you, when you go down into the push-up position, you squat down kind of into a frog position, and then you kick your legs out from behind you. And then we started going to these mobile small arms ranges, mm-hmm. where you have, your rifle.
Right.
And then you put one hand down into, a frog position.
Right.
And then that's called a point, post, sprawl.
Right.
And your gun has always been down range, and you've always been aiming at the enemies. So the way you got down to do a push-up was the way if in combat you needed to immediately get to the ground without putting your gun in the dirt.
Yeah.
That's how you would do it. And
wow.
so this whole,
so cool.
for weeks, months, we're doing this thing. And I'm why do we do it in this silly way? Just drop down to the ground and get in the push-up. And it was oh.
That's the meaning.
Everything we do was symbolic and it was muscle memory that made something that would be super difficult to explain to somebody to do the first time into something super simple.
Right.
And so it was I have that same sense what you were just saying is you come full circle to something and you're it's not stupid after all. Maybe society is the way it is because of so many factors and it's not just mean old man said so.
Yes.
And it's okay, maybe rule number 1 in Jordan Peterson's Beyond Order book, that's his second, third book rather, but his second order book, right? Maybe that one makes sense. Don't go tearing down societal structures that you had no business in understanding or creating.
I think while you were saying that, I just had a thought too. I found that my girlfriend loves comedy stand-ups. If we're sitting down or laying down to watch Netflix, that's the first thing that she wants to watch. Can we watch a stand-up? So
I know where you're going with this, and it's great. I love it.
If someone says a joke toward the beginning, they say a joke, and it's funny, just in and of itself. It's funny. They have a story or an anecdote, and it ends in a joke that kind of sums up the whole story, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's funny. The whole crowd laughs, and then they go into a different story, which might lead into a different story, and so on and so forth. But toward the end, there's a story that is totally unrelated to the first one that comes full circle, and you get the same reference to the same joke at the very beginning, and you're like, wow, and it makes it monumentally funnier.
Right, it related hilarious. Everything all together. It's the callback.
Yes.
That's like the classic way to do something.
It's just hilarious.
I love it. I knew exactly where you were going when you said comedy, and I was like, the callback. That's it. Like
that's it.
It wraps it all up, and because if anything in the middle wasn't funny, as long as you end it with what caught people's attention at the beginning, it's just hilarious. And they're like, you know. But, wow, okay. That sense of achievement, though, that understanding, right? We no longer struggle because we no longer see connectivity between so many things, right? And technology is also disconnecting us from the world, what we are connected to, that kind of meaningful connectivity. Because, let's face it, we are of nature. Mm-hmm. We're in nature and of nature. Technology that we have created is now driving a wedge between us and our environment. Right? And so that continuity that we used to have, that gave us struggle but also gave us meaning, right, is stunting our natural evolution.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, I mean, obviously, like, I keep hammering this. The fertility rates are going down. Like, of every race, everywhere across the planet, it's going down. That's not good for a species. That's very not good for a species.
I mean, it's there's something to be said of how, yes, bottled water, it's great. You can have pure, good, clean, drinkable water in a small, contained package. You can see through it. You know what it is. It's great. You can know who made it, where it came from. It says on the label.
The Hawaiian one is the best. I love this new Hawaiian water.
I love the core water. Core is best. I was all Fiji, but now I'm
No. Screw the Fiji water. There's a water that's from Hawaii. It was sold at a Walmart down south. I love it so much. I don't remember the name of it. It is a native Hawaiian name, but I don't give a fuck that I can't pronounce it because it's, got like 18 syllables. Right. But it's filtered through volcanic pumice. Like, it's great. Oh, wow. Like, it's got all this extra stuff. I've actually never tasted water that is just like, there's nothing added to it. There's like no extra minerals. This water, I'm telling you, is just so different. It's like from the top of the inactive volcanoes, and it's melted snow, and it's come down, and it's filtered through these igneous rocks, that are porous, and they take out all the gunk,
or at least they put one different chemical in it, and they told you that's the process they reached for. And that is what's crazy about it.
Pumice is just a chemical that they're using. But, no, this water tastes really good. It's like $2 a bottle, and I can't get enough of it.
But that serves my point, actually. Like, what I was saying is the water. I mean, we've developed plastic. We have this. It's so easy. It's easy to work with. It comes from fossil fuels, which we already make a lot of. And we can contain anything with it. I mean, half the things that I can look at right now in this room are made of plastic. Maybe not in this room.
I'm looking around. Clothes.
Or at least derivative
clothes,
of
blankets,
plastic.
everything plastic. Yeah.
My dress pants I'm wearing right now, these are polyester.
Yeah, this carpet's
so they're plastic.
Yeah.
But anyway, it harms us. Plastic is everywhere.
Yeah.
You find it. We can look in our biology. Microplastics just permeate us, and there's all of the evidence in the world that is very bad for us in the long term. And what are we going to do about it? Absolutely nothing, because we've gotten ourselves into a situation where we pretty much can't live without it. Life revolves around having the ability to pour around clean drinking water.
Yeah.
People don't even want to drink out of their taps anymore because it's not as clean as drinking water.
But
it's
they'll
literally
filter it through
the
a plastic
same
filter.
Yeah. And most bottled water actually comes from tap water. They just, they might screw with the pH balance a little bit. And then boom, you buy it for $2 a bottle.
Well, yeah, I think I saw recently Joe Rogan and
drink out of my plastic root beer bottle, or plastic root beer cup from McDonald's.
Yeah, right. McDonald's nonetheless. So it's probably not even really root beer. It's just chemical water. Well, yeah, that's what it is. It's filtered chemical water.
chemical sugar water. There's no escaping.
Escape from the modern world. No. Well, yes. Okay, so anyhow, Joe Rogan and Neil deGrasse Tyson, God bless those people.
Alaikum salam.
Yeah, they were talking about the Fiji water. Mm-hmm. Exactly that. They were like, why don't we just desalinate the ocean, Joe Rogan asks. And Neil deGrasse Tyson was like, well, because it's not cheap to do so right now. It's cheaper to get a bottle of water from Fiji shipped over here to drink rather than desalinate the. It's just about money. It's not about the convenience of something.
Or what we can do. We're more than capable of it. It's just it's
no one wants to fund that project.
Feasible.
Like, who's going to fund it?
Yeah.
Because, like, okay, we're here. You and I are here, and we live next to the largest bodies of fresh water on the planet.
Yeah.
And why would I raise my taxes to desalinate water in the ocean? Like, I don't need water. It's right here.
Right.
Granted, Lake Erie has this phrase where if it's green, it's clean. And there's a nuclear power plant that its compartments, if it goes into meltdown, the compartments will flood with lake water. Yeah. So it's already green because of the radiation. It's just not as shiny green as you would expect it. It's not Slurm from Futurama or whatever. But, okay, back to, in all seriousness, though, this amount of technology is stunting our natural evolution, right? In not just the sense that it's poisoning us, but in the sense that, like, we're lazy. We're lazy as fuck. We're not fulfilling the biological imperative. And obviously, this is the first time we've ever mentioned that in the podcast. So the biological imperative is something that I kind of came up with. I've seen the term floating around on the internet, but not super common. I think it was mentioned in Starship Troopers, perhaps. But I've never read that, nor have I watched it. But I think I saw it in a quote on the internet, and I really liked it. If I hadn't already come up with it. They would have come about at the same time, I think. Well, obviously not the movie or the book in my idea, but I came up with the idea and I might have seen it. Or vice versa. I saw it and then came up with the idea. But anyhow, the biological imperative is my idea that this is like the driving force of every living organism on the planet, because it has nothing to do with instinct, because it's pre-brain. Yeah. It's, there is no instinct, emotion, or rationale behind it. It's literally just the driving force that single-celled organisms do. They reproduce, they, adapt, and they maintain themselves in such a way so that they can expand and propagate and, live.
It's the most fundamental goal of all living things ever, history, period.
And I use the biological imperative as the model for strivalism, what we should be doing, right? And, our technology is poisoning us. It's stunting our natural evolution by impeding us. And I need to go back and really think about why technology limits humanity in some sort of way. Be it mentally or physically, it's limiting us from getting to maybe our full potential in terms of the human perfection.
Well, I'll bring up this point too. This is something I think we've talked about in years past. Medicine. Modern technology has allowed us, and modern chemistry has allowed us to have different medicines such that we can stave off horrible diseases that would have weeded out entire populations in years past. But now, that doesn't happen. I'm not saying that the earth is overpopulated. Yes, there are a lot of people, but that's a whole different topic for another day. But we have a lot of people now. I mean, in 1800, we crossed the line where there were 1 billion people on the planet, and now we have over 7 times that. We're pushing 8. It's what, like 7
I think it did hit 8 the other day. That was like a big deal.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, we're at 8 times that now.
Even worse.
In 222 years. That's crazy. That's insane. For the last 20,000 years, where we've been pretty much anatomically the same, where we've been, writing and doing normal human things.
Yeah, like 300, almost 400,000 years, I think. Is what they're like. 400 is like the high limit.
Yes,
that's the very liberal limit. The conservative limit is 200,000.
Well, I'm thinking written history, just in terms of.
Oh yeah. The last 12,000.
Us writing,
yeah.
So just in the last however many thousand years, I mean, it's been. Oh, there are 2 people over there and 5 people over here, and I've got 3 people in my family. But now, I mean, if you spit that direction and you throw a rock that direction, you're going to hit 5 people either way.
Yes.
So, regardless, whereas in, let's say, an animal environment, if you have a disease, it might weed out 10%, a quarter, a third, half of a population. But we don't have that now. I mean, we have developmental disability. I mean these aren't environmental things, but we have developmental disabilities. In years past, sure, you might take care of them. And obviously that's another argument for another day too. You can get into eugenics, but that's not the direction I'm trying to go.
That can be next episode.
That can be, yeah.
I mean, because one of my books that I've been reading recently is Creating Future People.
Yes.
Oh, and
yeah,
so
that would be a good
that
topic.
has to do exactly with technology and our development.
Okay,
and so
that's
that's the human perfection that I was talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there an equilibrium between human perfection and technological perfection? Yeah. That's a brilliant idea that you just came up with.
That. But anyway, so I mean, smallpox, the plague ravaged the entire known world in the mid 1300s. We had no way to combat that, but now the disease isn't really even that spreadable or that serious in the modern world. People still get it and they don't spread it.
Yeah.
Because we're clean now. We have the technology to get rid of it and the technology to treat each other. So, well, what effect is that going to have on us in the future? Or, and this is a really big one that I feel like not enough people are talking about too. The antibiotics and antivirals that we have, there are germs that are beginning to evolve such that they can still evolve, but we're not. Our immune systems aren't evolving to keep up with, the technology, the medicines that we have.
Yeah.
But the germs are.
Because we're not.
And someday they're going to kill us.
Wow. Yeah, because we're using technology as a crutch and a safety net rather than, I don't even know what to.
Like vaccines. Vaccines are great. The smallpox vaccine is great. We've essentially killed off smallpox. Smallpox does not exist outside of virology labs. But there are other diseases that are pretty common, like the cold. The cold has been around for forever, or influenza.
Yeah.
There's no telling when things like this are going to branch off, evolve, and it's going to be some superbug that kills us all because it's immune to the crutches that we've been using for the last, 100, 150 years.
Yeah.
It's insanity to think about. And there have been several, I've read some articles about how we're already starting to see instances of that. Oh, another good example. Bed bugs. So bed bugs they're not very common. They were not very common 50 years ago. It was something that happened. It was odd. You might get them, you might not. But now it is incredibly common. It's estimated that it's like 2 out of 20 or something, some crazy number like that. Beds have a bed bug in them right now. I mean, you find them in airports, benches, you can find them anywhere. It's crazy. And in the 40s and 50s, a lot of hospital beds used to be metal frame. It's simple, but also in the event of bed bugs or other small pests like that, you can douse it in alcohol and burn it and they all die. But we started using, what was it called? It's not
Zyklon
DMT.
A.
It's not DMT. It was some
DMT.
It was something like that, I'm pretty sure. But it was used.
Hallucinogen?
No, not that.
Oh.
It sounded like that. It was
DMT,
okay. DTM or something like that.
Okay. I was like, I didn't
But it
know
was
we
used.
were doing that.
It was used as a pesticide on bed bugs, and it was incredibly effective. But it became so little of a problem that we decided, we'll stop using it. And the bed bugs evolved. The same pesticides that we used to use on them don't work anymore. The pesticides that you go to get at Walmart don't work on bed bugs anymore. Wow. They don't. They tell you that it does, and it can slow them down, but they don't really work all that effectively.
Wow, yeah. I think I've only experienced bed bugs once, and it was like, army stuff. You
Yeah.
just went and got into a random bed in the bay, and that's where it was. And so I was so afraid that any of the clothes, uniforms, or anything that I wore in that bed, I would transfer back to Fort Campbell when I went back, and
it's a huge problem in the Navy. Actually, there are nuclear subs. As soon as you get one, they're everywhere because they spread very quickly, and they can run like 10, or what is it, like 10 meters per hour or something like that. It's crazy. I read a lot about it because I tend to go down that rabbit hole, but it's a problem on nuclear subs.
Why did you read about bed bugs?
Because it's so weird. They're ancient. They are thousands of years old, and they're relatively unchanged, kind of like alligators and crocodiles.
Wait, so they're not changing phenotypically? They're just changing genetically?
Yes. They're evolving to be resistant to the things that we throw at them because we're not exterminating.
So that they can eat.
Yes. All so they can eat. Isn't that insane?
Wow, that
it's such a growing problem, specifically up north, because they like heat, but they're not that into the closer to the equator you get, the more different they are. I think there are like 3 main species. The closer to the equator you get, the less active they are. But up north, where it's colder, they need to get close to you because they need to live.
So their struggle, their comf, is so much.
They practice strivalism, let me tell you.
Honestly, maybe we should just be the bugs. Like Klaus Schwab is telling me to eat the bugs, but maybe I should just be the bugs. Beelzebubs.
Beelzebub. Anyway, that was a bit of a side topic.
Stunning our natural evolution that's gonna. Well, maybe that's the question. Is this going to kill our biological imperative, at least in humans? Is that killing that wedge that we're driving between us and nature? Is that going to disconnect us from the... I mean, obviously...
I think yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so difficult because I'd have to explain this and illustrate it in such a way. So, like, the biological imperative, think of that as the ground level, right? And as we climb Mount Improbable, we're adding another layer to let's call it like a terraced pyramid, if you will. We'll make a chart like that, right? So the base level is the biological imperative. All life is based off of that insatiable need to survive. Then the first terrace above that would be instinct. All animals have instinct. That's fight, flight, freeze, fuck. We get 1 F-bomb.
I think we're on what? 4?
Maybe. So then you get instinct, and then the next terrace up, which is built upon instinct and biological imperative, right? They're all connected still. The second terrace would be emotions. In my opinion, this is just me, I've been thinking about this idea for several years. I've illustrated this before. Yeah,
we've talked this, we've been on this topic ad nauseum.
Yeah, for at least 5 years talking about strivalism. Yeah. I think actually it was just before I left for Germany in 2017.
Yeah, it was.
So it's been 5 years.
Yeah.
Over.
5.5 years. Because we had talked about this idea, like I said, ad nauseum, but we didn't have a name for it. I think you coined the term.
Strivalism,
we had essentially come to the same conclusion, both with talking with each other and, working on our own, trying to find a way to put it into work, manifest it into an actual idea that we could actually name. So
something all-encompassing. Yeah, so you have biological imperative, instinct, emotion, and then rationale. And where, you would think, humans, we're on top of the terrace that is rationale. Quite the contrary. We are just encroaching rationale.
Right.
Like, this is something that, in name, we've recently developed. Obviously, raison, rationale, all that stuff. That's, like, very recent in human history. Mind you that we're not the only species climbing this Mount Improbable, if you will. The Richard Dawkins, great. I love him. He's wonderful man of science. obviously everyone has their faults, whatever,
Yeah.
blah blah blah. I'm not going to.
Everyone has their
I'm not gonna
opinion
get
on
into
them,
that.
but you know, separate the art from the artist here.
I love artists in particular from. Never mind. I won't get into that. But no, we're all climbing Mount Improbable, right? So humans aren't the only ones that will be capable or have been capable.
Right.
Now, don't mix my words here. I don't think anything else has ever reached the level that we are on.
Oh, absolutely not. No.
They've been on their own trajectories, maybe towards something like that.
Right.
I mean, there's the super velociraptors were really smart. You know, people are saying that, but anyhow, we are on emotion.
Yeah.
And we can touch, we can start to climb up onto the rationale terrace, but we have not conquered that by any means. And what is beyond rationale?
Yeah.
Like,
it makes me think of David Hume. He was an English philosopher in the late 1700s. His way of reasoning that very question, or just how people work in general, was that we are slaves to the passions. We're slaves to our own passions, and once we've already got our minds made up on what we're going to do based on our passions, we use rationale and facts to justify it. So if I'm a car salesman, so if I want this car, I don't need it, but I like it. I like the car. I like the feeling it gives me when I'm in it. I like the look that people are going to give me when I drive it. I like the sound that it makes. I like feeling powerful when I drive it. Those are the things that people think, and that's why they decide they want the car. They don't buy it because they say, oh, you know, I can afford this monthly. This is exactly where I was looking to be. I was looking to pay exactly $251.77 on my monthly car payment.
very seldom do people come into it.
Very seldom.
There are people that go in, I'm sure that, like, hey, I just need something to get me A to B.
They do.
And that's, like, super common.
Yeah.
But it's not as common as people walking in wanting a brand new Jeep Wrangler and getting convinced to buy a Mercedes-Benz.
Which happens way more. I mean, I've had people come into me looking for a certain vehicle that is $26,000. They know because they did the math at home on they Googled car loan calculator and they put in a weird interest rate. But I have people come in, they're looking at a specific vehicle, they sit in it and they're like, I don't really like it all that much. And then we'll look at other maybe similar things. And they like those better. And they buy those. And again, they don't even buy those. Sometimes it might not even be $26,000. It's probably more. That's typically what happens. If you go in and you don't buy the car that you were going to look at, you almost always buy something that was more expensive.
Huh.
Not because, I talked them into it, or whoever they were working with talked them into it. It's that they liked it, and they could justify it using whatever rationale they needed to make the purchase. So if I go in, I like the Jeep Wrangler, but I'm going to pay another $75 a month, $150 a month more than what I wanted to do. But if I go in there, I like it. I like sitting high up. It feels good. The steering is good, which isn't true of Jeep Wranglers, but
no power steering,
right? But it sits good. It feels good. I like the culture. I like to be able to customize my vehicles, and I say, you know what? I can afford it.
Yeah.
You know what? I've always kind of wanted one. You know what? I got a promotion last month. I can afford it. I might as well treat myself.
That's a really good illustration of Hume's. I never really... I've kind of ignored the Enlightenment era English, just thinkers in general. I've read them. I know Candide by Voltaire and Discourse on Inequality by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And, I've read these things, but I never really illustrated them into something palatable.
It's kind of... The thing I like about Hume specifically is that Hume was so realistic in his looking at things. Like Kant. I know you're familiar with Kant. It's a very divorced view of how people work inside, because there absolutely are people that are probably autistic, but there are absolutely people that will look at the world with a whole structure above them, and they apply that structure to whatever it is they're about to do.
Creationists.
Yes.
Creationists
most people
are autistic. Let's get that out there.
Creationists are autistic.
I believe it.
Very few people actually do that because it's hard. I mean, if I'm going to say my girlfriend asks me, "Hey, can we go to the store? I want to go to Plato's Closet," because I get that question all the time. I don't really want to go, but it'd be good for my relationship to go. She likes going. I like making her happy. And it's not going to really hurt me all that much. These are things that actually go through my head. And you know what? I end up going. Yeah. But if I had that's a Humean way of looking at things. It's a realistic human way of looking at things. Ironically, human.
That's an aptonym.
Yes. But if I say I was to use a very Kantian way of approaching that, I'd have a notepad out. I would weigh the pros and cons. And I would do X, Y, and Z and carry the one, and then I might, decide to go or not go. It's a very different way of looking at things, and I think a lot of people don't realize how hard it is to actually have that way of approaching everything in your life.
Well, I forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think you're misunderstanding the critique of pure reason. That it was his idea was that, like, I forget if it was there is no pure reason because everything is predicated upon human want, things like that. But yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, like there really is no like cold calculation of do or do not. Like
there is no try.
Yeah, you have two very good illustrations by yourself in that vein. So then you go into like, well, how do we survive? Because if we only ever act based off of our wants and use reason after that, because as you were trying to illustrate, is we're not purely rational. Like we haven't conquered
absolutely.
Reason. So we sit here on emotion,
right?
And we're just dipping into rationale when it's because it is a tool,
right? And
rationale is not just for yourself. As you said, you're a car salesman. You use rationale, albeit by deception and being dishonest, but you're using rationale to get people to do something that perhaps you want them to do. Right. And so I think both of you are acting Humean,
yes,
if you will, that you're both working to get what you want, and by reason you're getting into the same car and driving off into the sunset.
Right.
Right. I assume that's what you do when you sell cars. So my idea is, or like the next question I have is, without this biological imperative, right? If we sweep that out and the whole foundation of our terrace pyramid goes under, if we become disconnected from that, right? Because I think that biological imperative also drives all of those things, right? And I'm not saying, you want to survive? Buy a Mercedes-Benz. But I think there's a thing, the reason why you try to rationalize it is like, I would look really good in this car.
Exactly.
I might attract a mate. Exactly. It's all about breeding at the end of the day.
The perpetuation of the gene.
Right. And so how does a species survive, right? And this, I love when I get into this right after I talk about the biological imperative, right? Because, like, you do all these things, but these technologies of our brain hinder us from just reproducing.
Yeah.
Right? So how do we go about survival? Because it's harder to survive when you have emotions, because these emotions are dependent upon chemical reactions in your brain. Right? And so when you get depressed, you're out of whack. Like, what are you doing?
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so
that's a perfect example, actually.
Yeah. So and that's a biotech kind of thing that we have, because technically we are just a single cell that has built armor around itself in like a very, very rudimentary understanding of biological evolution. But no, that's like the funny thing is that, like, 4 billion years ago,
Yeah.
or 3.5 or whatever, we were just a single cell. Maybe not you exactly, but
Right.
like the energy or
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
A single cell just started building itself up,
Yeah.
and like this is the mech suit that it's in.
It divided. Wow, there are two of me?
I like how you look.
I
Let's
might do
make
this
4.
That is, we'll have to talk about that one.
Homoeroticism at the cellular level.
I think, you know what? We were talking earlier about how stories and humor is a good way to get the message across, and this is a perfect
the
example.
primary layer
Exactly.
of communication is a perfect vehicle for just getting it across, because it's easier to travel across the surface of the world rather than underneath it.
Yeah. You know what we just did?
We came full circle.
We came full
We
circle.
did a callback. And it made it great because it just encapsulated
Well, it's official.
everything.
This conversation has meaning now.
It hasn't had any meaning whatsoever until this very moment. So do you want to survive? I'm asking you, do you want to survive right now?
I think so.
Okay, well then what you're going to do, what is necessary for a species to survive is to reproduce, adapt, and maintain, right? So when you reproduce, you're just genetically duplicating, like you're actually reproducing, asexual, sexual, and then when you adapt, what you're doing is adapting to different environments. So this would be, I think, what the human species was doing in going to other continents and maybe intermingling with other hominins and stuff, and making what we call, in an unscientific term, race.
Yeah.
And I think that's perfect because, like, you have, Asians are better suited for low oxygen environments,
Right.
I think is why they said that. Well, I mean, obviously you have the Himalayas and things like that, but then you have Africans, which are definitely developed for more arid climate.
Right. Well, I mean, it's the same reason why Europeans have narrow noses and Africans don't. The
Right,
air is
right.
hot in Africa,
Yeah.
so you want it to cool as it goes in, so you
Yeah.
have larger openings.
Less friction.
Yeah,
and
but if you have a more narrow nose, the air will get warmer as it enters your body.
Yeah.
You don't want to breathe in cold air. That sucks.
Yeah, and it wasn't a deterministic evolution where it was like, oh, it's cold here, let's start adapting.
Yeah, it just
it
happens, and it happens.
Well, the motherfuckers that got cold, they probably got the sniffles a lot and died.
And the ones that had narrower noses probably didn't get the sniffles as much, and they died less. That's
died
what people
less.
don't understand about evolution.
Yeah.
The things that are here aren't because they planned it. It's because the people that didn't have them died more.
less. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The people that did have it died less, and the people that didn't died more. Yeah. So, how do we, as we're encroaching, rationale, how do we rationalize the ideas of reproduction, adaptation, and maintenance of a species? Because when you adapt, you're going into these new environments, and maintaining is not necessarily like the pruning,
Right.
but it's or culling.
Yes.
I wish I could have recorded my face on that, just the blank
that
death
was it.
stare.
You just realized
culling.
that.
That's not necessarily what I mean, but the maintenance is maintaining a proper balance between population and resources.
I think...
And like sometimes maintenance of a species is not done by the species itself. It's done by a great many other things.
Right.
Extinction level events.
Right.
Bottlenecking events.
Right.
Viruses.
Microplastics.
Well, hey, people shit on the Romans for using lead.
Plumbum.
Yeah, that's PB.
Yeah.
That's the very good.
Yes.
That's the elemental
Sometimes
Whoa.
I'll just think in my head, I'll just blurt something out. And
periodic
I
table.
had to say it.
Periodic table, pencil broken, lead.
But anyway, yes, people shit on the Romans.
Yeah, for using all this lead, and it's like, well, like your microplastics are actually doing probably worse than what lead was doing.
They didn't even have a way of proving. I mean,
they knew what lead was, but
knew
they didn't really have an idea of... Well, maybe they did have an idea of erosion. I can't honestly say that they didn't, but they probably were like, hey, make a lead pipe, water goes through it, they don't think, oh, hey, at the microscopic level, did you know that the lead is actually being disintegrated by the friction caused by water moving on its surface?
And you know what? They probably... I'll have to read about that, actually. Did they know that lead was bad? Because it's possible that they knew if you have too much, you might get sick. But
they thought that about everything.
It. Yeah.
No, they believed in the four... what was it called? Phlegm, bile.
Oh,
blood.
yes. Yeah. That
They
was
believed
a Greek thing, and the Romans took it and ran with it.
Well,
I remember
I forget what it was called.
Shoot.
Exactly. The four fluids? I don't know. But anyhow, they believed everything being in balance, so they were probably just like, some lead's good, a lot of lead's bad.
Yes.
No lead also bad.
Right.
Which is
because
wrong.
then no water.
Oh, yeah. But... I mean, if we just increase the fluoride in our water, we'd be fine.
Yeah.
Like, the number of trannies would go up, and conservative values go down.
Exactly.
And...
Pump up that fluoride.
Yeah, I mean, there's not enough fluoride in the water right now.
I think a certain Alex Jones had something to say about this.
Alex who?
Yeah, he doesn't exist.
Yeah. He only exists when they need him to pay money for saying that this school shooting. Yeah, what was it? Sandy Hook? Shady
Hoax.
The retirement home that's literally like
Shady
up the road
Oaks Retirement Village.
That kid just went in there and shot everybody up. Crisis actors. I saw the same kid with the same backpack walk in and out of that building 4 times.
But even I just want to get this out there, because we don't need to go on some conspiratorial rant.
Yes, we do.
And this isn't even conspiratorial, but it is absolutely insane to me. Not that I'm not doubting the validity of the Sandy Hook shooting.
Well,
sure.
I am.
there might be some things about it that are like, that's kind of fishy. Where did the trillions of dollars go that the Pentagon lost, and then 9/11 happened? One of those situations.
The Pentagon lost another $1 trillion recently.
Did you see? I'm just on we're leapfrogging here, but did you see that the Pentagon announced that they cannot account for 60% of their assets?
Oh, bro, no,
that is absolutely fucking insane.
Being in the Army, being in the Army, right? As like you're a private and you sign for all this shit, right? You have no idea what it is, but some officer is just telling you, hey, sign your name here.
Right.
You're responsible for this property. You go and lose that property. That officer does everything in his power to make sure that he's not responsible for it anymore, even though he is.
Right.
Right? It's his property. He just signed it to you temporarily. Right? He makes sure that it's like all just like everything is kind of and covers it up. Right? And so at the microscopic level, at the private level, shit is getting lost in the Army. And it could be like a $400 screwdriver that the Army paid way too much for because they're stupid. And they'll just pay for it because they have to blow the budget anyway. In order to keep that budget, right?
Raytheon is seething right now.
Right, yeah. So that private that lost that hammer is like, that's not a big deal. It's just a hammer. But that's $400. Like, if every private, which, okay, if 1 out of 100 privates loses something, it's already been paid for by tax dollars. So it's like ridiculously expensive because somebody knew that money was coming anyway, so they can charge whatever the hell they want. There might only be like 10 items missing. And that's like all the budget is gone. Like
60% of the entire U.S. military budget is air conditioning and Q-tips.
Literally, you might be correct.
I saw this thing. It was a video of Trump he was talking to people. I believe it was Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah.
But people had asked him about, what was it? What was his first chief of staff for the military, or the Joint Chiefs? Mattis. It was
Mattis, Mattis. Mattis, and then I think it went to West.
Yeah, it was Mattis. No, this was before, because this was...
Maybe that's the SecDef. I have no fucking clue.
Whoever it was, whoever was in charge of us pulling out of
6
Afghanistan.
F-bomb, by the way.
Huh?
6 F-bomb, by the way.
Yeah.
Pulling us out of Afghanistan was General Milley.
Milley, that's who it was.
Yeah, that's
whoever
just
it was.
Army. Yeah.
Whoever was in charge of overseeing our withdrawal of all of our forces from Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Trump was saying, this is how I knew that this general was an idiot. Because this general said, sir, it's going to be more expensive for us to pull our equipment out of Afghanistan than for us to just leave it there. And Trump said, we have a $50 million helicopter sitting on a pad somewhere, and you're telling me that it is more expensive to put some...
a minute amount of gas in it.
To put some gas in it, fly it 200 miles away to Pakistan so we can ship it home. You're saying that that is better for us in the long term than for us to leave it there for who knows who to get it. And
yes,
this general said, yes, sir.
Yeah, he
that
was
is
a
what we
fucking
believe.
idiot. He was an idiot about
7.
COVID, too. Yeah. Fuck. Had to make it a
8, 9,
round
10.
number.
There we go. Nice 10. But that is insane to me that we can't account for that.
He was a fucking idiot.
We had a really solid outline for how this conversation was going to go, and then we just nosedived.
Well, I forget where we got off on that. I was like, if you want to survive, you're going to do this. And then you said something about Alex Jones. This is your fault. You pointed out that I sounded like Alex Jones. The Great Reset. No, anyhow. Reproduction, adaptation, and maintenance. Those are what you're going to do to survive as a species. Any species, all species. Like those are like 3 things that you got to do, right?
I would add flourish in there too. As like a last one.
Well, what do you mean by flourish?
So to flourish so obviously you want to say them again.
Reproduce.
Yeah, you want to reproduce.
That's just a simple increase in population, passing the genes on, right? Yeah. Then you have adaptation, which is adapting in different environments, which is, humans growing wings and flying on Venus or whatever if we need to, or underwater, gills if we need to do that, right? Not need if we are able to do that,
right?
And then there's the maintenance, which is the proper balance between population and resources.
And I would say flourish is just a way of the effectiveness of that maintenance, the effectiveness of it all. Maybe it doesn't need to be a 4th branch of it, but to flourish, when I think of that, because when I think reproduce.
Oh, well, in order to flourish as a species, you're going to do all 3 of those things. Right. I think you're encapsulating all of those in that. Because the maintenance of species, I think what you were about to say was the maintenance of species, population, and resources, it's like, well, you're going to stay stagnant. And that's when you decline.
That's exactly what spurred me to think that.
Well, as you keep reproducing, you have to keep upping the amount of food that you can find. So that's why these vast swaths of mammoths would travel thousands of miles.
Because I would say that
forage.
Like here in the U.S., I don't know what the birth rate is, but it's something around the lines of 2. Yeah. It's lower in Europe, but if we're just talking about the birth rate, on average, a couple is going to have 2 children.
Yeah.
And that doesn't increase the population, it's just maintaining it. Yeah. That's how I thought of that, and that's why when I think flourish, I think have fucking 20 kids.
Yeah, if you think, well, it not even because think means like the rationale and emotion of it, the Humean thought process.
Humean.
It's you exist. The biological imperative is compelling you to do this. Obviously, so I was going to say, if you think that your genes are good enough to do it, like,
do it.
Be fruitful and multiply.
Yes.
Like, I think that's a good point. You don't have to think that your genes are good. Obviously, you've survived this long. Like, it is the case. Obviously, now we're facing mutations at like a weird rate because of the things we're ingesting.
Yes. Well, that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. The technology, it's stunting our growth, but also it's fostering growth in directions that may not be the most beneficial to us.
Right. Is our population size, like, because technology was great for increasing the population and making people not starve all the time. Right? Technology,
all the time.
Technology was instrumental in that, and like, more life, good thing, bad thing. neutral.
Right.
Like, we don't know, because we don't know if agriculture was an invention that'll lead to our infinite survival or our imminent demise.
Right.
Sorry, I don't know why I said adamant.
I think I just thought of this. This is going to be a weird. I'm going to say it anyway. So here in the I don't know why I'm going to hesitate. That's how fucked up our world is. If I have a thought that's very valid, but some people might not like it, my first reaction shouldn't be, maybe I shouldn't say that. My first reaction should be, say it everywhere.
Yeah,
anyway, so here in the West, life is comfortable. We don't really, like I was saying, we don't really have a lot of struggles. So I don't need to have 10 children so that half of them live to adulthood.
Oh, yeah.
But if you look in Bangladesh, one of the most densely populated countries in the world, I mean, you throw a dart and it goes through 3 people.
So vulgar.
In Bangladesh, they're having all kinds of children. I mean, they're having so many people in such a small space. But there's enough technology to keep them from, not having half of their children die.
The Red Cross
but also,
is over there.
They still have a lot of children because it's still kind of an uncertainty. So it's this weird space between where every country has been before. I mean, Europe was there. Here we were there here in the West. But these developing countries, they're making all of these people, but there's enough technology so where not all of them are dying by the time they're 5 months old.
You would think if, like, the struggle, like, it's hard to survive.
Yeah.
Where are they finding the time to do all this fucking?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Like, the Irish, for example, because I want to pick on the Irish, right? They don't get picked on enough in modern society. Not only are they, like, all gingers
just
and have
the
this
English gave
terrible brogue or whatever they want to call it, they come over here to this land, right? And they bring their potatoes with them.
Potatoes.
Yeah. And they're clawing with their dirty little Irish hands at the frozen soil in the U.S. and in Canada, and they're just trying to put a potato in there, but they still find time at the end of the night to go and bang whatever her name was. Breganelli, like some stupid name.
Yes.
Like, shouldn't you be scraping at the ground? No wonder a famine happened.
But it is very interesting because how is there so much reproduction going on in these developing countries when they have to worry about so much in terms of making their lives comfortable, whereas here our lives are already, just as a standard, our lives are comfortable here.
Yeah.
Unless even homeless people here have it better than a lot of people in these developing countries. But anyway.
Yeah. No, you're right.
It's so easy.
Somebody
here.
who works tirelessly every day in, say, Africa is living like a homeless man in America is living better than that person.
Yeah, because he's still a homeless man. A homeless man could be a dude who lives out of his car.
Yeah.
I mean, that dude still has technology that wizards in the medieval times would have been like, oh,
yeah.
What?
Homeless people live streaming them eating like somebody else.
Banging. Kings would have paid and spilled the blood of their entire armies just to be able to have some of the things that your average dude who lives out of his car has. And so
you know what? And he still
me,
would have been man enough to survive the heart attack of eating a McDonald's mukbang.
Yeah.
That's the power of ancient man.
But the point I'm getting at is it is astounding how they do all of this reproduction in these developing countries and they have so many children, whereas here our lives are so easy that you'd think that that's all we would do. Mm. And it is all that we do. But we have created a culture where reproducing and the successful consequences of reproducing are actually more inconvenient than they are beneficial. Hence abortion, hence hookup culture, and it just spirals from there. And Russia has the same problem. I mean, the Russian population is declining dramatically. Japan is another good example. Anime ruined them. They need a third one. But with Russia, the Russian people have kind of checked out. I mean, they lost all of the men in the war, and now they have given up. The Soviet Union fell. They don't really have anything going for them.
That's why Alexander Dugin is actually a very, very important man to read right now. Because he is acting almost in the same vein that Rasputin was a womanizer and could like manipulate a lot of people in that kind of way. Mm-hmm. Alexander Dugin is the doomer intellect kind of guy, like mysticism, where he is mobilizing Russian men to almost do like whatever because of their weird blend of Eastern and Western ideas. Like Alexander Dugin is actually a really, really important author to be reading right now.
See, I've heard of him, but
his books are impossible to find online.
Alexander Dugin.
They are not on Amazon. He's particularly, like, specifically banned from Amazon.
I was just about to say that's probably very purposeful.
I have copies of his books.
Because I've heard of him and I've seen
the Fourth Political Theory is like, you need to write that one down. That's
Fourth Political Theory?
Yeah, that's the book you need to read, like, right off the bat.
Fourth Political Theory. Oh, how are we on time, by the
way? We are at 1 hour and 35. It is also 8:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, plus shipping and handling.
How can I not spell it? There we go. Political. We want to do 2 hours and call it a day?
Oh, yeah. We can keep going. But as we are becoming disconnected from our biological imperative, this is full circle back to that, right? If we become disconnected from the biological imperative, if we want to survive, we're going to start using technology. And that's where I, like, draw the line. Like, we're no longer human if we're disconnected from the biological imperative. There's no more meaning to life. There's no. That is, like, the exact nihilism that Nietzsche was talking about. But instead of disconnecting from God, this supernatural thing, we're now disconnecting from the natural thing, which is like the only connection we have left to the world around us, right? And so if we get cut from that and we start using technology, like say all these populations are declining, then we start using in vitro fertilization, and then technology can advance so far that it becomes a horror.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why I said French bulldog before. There is not a single French bulldog that is living right now on this planet that was born via natural birth. We have bred French bulldogs to have such narrow hips in the back that females can't give birth. So every single French bulldog is delivered by C-section.
What a strange thing.
I mean,
smartphones, dumb people.
Yeah.
Okay, and then one of the things that you said, this was so long ago that this may not even connect. It might not even hit. But you were talking about building a fence and, like, actually just going out there and sweating and, like, doing something, right? And so our lack of a sense of accomplishment due to our specialization in things.
Specialization in what way?
Well, there's a man that just comes and does the fence for you. And you only do one thing.
Yeah.
You don't have, like... Because when you come home from work, you come home most of the time to no more work.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas back in the day, it was like, hey, at work, I blew out my shoe. Now I must repair my shoe.
Right.
It was... I mean, that... Specialization, how do I put it? Specialization,
that is a really fair point, actually.
It starts with a D, and it's when you are in a leadership position and you delegate. So when you delegate all these tasks out to very specific people, right? That takes the struggle off your shoulders, and because they're a specialist, it usually just works.
It should increase their effectiveness in doing so as well.
Right, and that's like the whole like capitalist thing is like just specialize and everything is way more efficient. But it's like, bro, the fact that like some people like literally don't know how to change their own oil.
Yeah.
And like, in a sense, taking that struggle off of your shoulders and putting it onto somebody else's shoulders is still a burden for yourself. Like, it's even more of a burden now because it's just taxing you. Like, literally, it's just money.
Yeah.
And so now you have to keep working to make more money.
And you have to continue working in your special field to make money.
Yeah.
To have this thing that you don't specialize in done.
And maybe it's literally not the lack of a sense of accomplishment. It's just the lack of experience. And I'm not talking about experiences in like, oh, you really experienced it. It's just, hey, I had to go do something I've never done before. That was interesting. That, like,
I think diversity of experience, like, in the context that we're talking about, I think it makes you a more rounded person. Yeah. And I think a point that I'd like to make, I don't know how valid it is to the line of reasoning we're on right now, but I'd like to point it out. I think a lot of that has to do with there are more people now. We can specialize in things more because there are more people to specialize in, whereas before there were fewer people, so you had to be more versed in multiple things because there may not be someone to do that. And I think cowboys out west, you had to do a lot. You had to do a lot of things because there weren't very many people out there. Sure, you might have a shoemaker and you might have a banker and you might have a prostitute. Those are specialized, occupations. But in general, you kind of had to do a lot of things for yourself. You might build your own house. You might, furnish your own house. And that's something that your average person might be able to do.
Would you not think that doing all those things would give you like more a sense of meaning or like connection to what things are? I mean, because like I took no part in making anything in this room except for maybe its arrangement and some of the writings that I have.
Yeah.
But I've taken no part in the building or making any of these things.
That is absolutely true. Because
I'm a consumer.
Yes. I know for damn sure if I built myself a chair and I really liked this chair because I made it with my own two hands, that's a chair that I would keep for a long time. But if I go and buy a chair that, I might spend $100 in materials making a chair. But I can make it however I want to. Mm-hmm. Even if it's not totally original to me, I still made it. It is my chair. There is not a single chair that exists like it that was made by me. It's my chair. But I can go to Walmart and spend $50 on a chair. It's not my chair. There are 1,000 other chairs. Everyone has this chair. It's not special. When it's broken, I will discard it. There is no meaning in that chair. There is no meaning in my relationship with that chair. And I think that is I wouldn't say it's the source, but I think it is a fundamental source of why there is less attachment, or not attachment. I don't want to say that because sentimentality isn't what we're going after.
Well, no, but
meaning, relationship with the meaning of an object. It wasn't handmade. Why do people prefer buying? Some people prefer buying some things that are handmade versus something that you can get at the store. Why am I going to spend $1,000 on a pair of handmade dress shoes by an 80-year-old Italian craftsman? Well, because they're handmade. He's an expert in his field. It's handmade. He knows how to make special shoes. I can have him custom make them. They can be custom to my feet. Bespoke to my feet is the proper word.
Yeah.
Or I could go to Walmart and buy, $100 leather shoes, and they fall apart after a year, and I throw them away and buy another pair. I have no attachment to those shoes because there's no value in them. Their value is only whatever use they are to me.
Are those Chinamen that in the sweatshops, are they not experts in their craft?
Now that is a whole separate issue that I think that we should touch on in a later thing as well. I mean, what is the difference
between a factory worker and a craftsman?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of a difference. And we should. No, but I liked what you were saying about the meaning or attachment to objects that are like, not just objects. The meaning in, it was handmade versus factory made. And, yes. We are losing our connection to things because of the ease in which things were made. I think that was coming full circle to movies. Yes. I had this great connecting thing to it, but it was like devoid of meaning.
Yes.
Devoid, is it? Void, just void. It's void of meaning.
Yeah.
And when it has no meaning, no significance, there was no special attention and care into every stitch. It's something that we can just throw away. And I think that's what we do when we go to the movies. We generally throw these away. Now, it might be that you and I have this weird obsession with Star Wars because it but you have to think that was such a cultural icon, if you will, when we were kids. Like, the entire toy aisle was just Star Wars. So I know it wasn't just you and me.
Yes.
It was everyone. Star Wars was so important that they made a video game every year.
Yeah.
They made, there were hundreds of books and comic books and action figures and TV shows.
Yeah.
And I mean, the movies are still coming out, which shows that like it's still people
It's still
our age are,
relevant enough,
it's still relevant enough. But now that it's void of its real like meaning and importance, right? Because it's just lights on a screen now. It's not a deep story where people can sit and have a very intellectual conversation about the philosophy behind Star Wars.
I think
That's
are you
why
done with your point? Keep going.
One last thing. That's why the stores and toy stores aren't full of Star Wars stuff anymore, because it doesn't connect
doesn't
to
mean
people.
as much.
Because no one, after watching it, no one wants to reenact it. No kid is running around on the playground right now going, "I'm Luke Skywalker," or "I'm Anakin, and I'm going to do what they did because I want to be like them,
Right.
and I want to like become the hero. I want to be the savior of the galaxy." Stuff like that. Nobody thinks about that stuff. And if anything, they're like, what's really telling is that fidget spinners came out like after that. The toys are dumbing down. And maybe it's just because I'm an adult and I'm also growing like in the opposite direction where I'm like, the toys are just dumb now.
Yeah.
But like what I was playing with, I feel like was very like interesting. Like you had all these card games where like the points and the math and the crazy lore behind it.
Yeah.
And now it's just like, I don't know. I don't know what it is. So I really can't dog on it.
I have two things. The first thing, which I thought of when you were talking about Star Wars, is it's kind of like my mind wants to go to the Kali Yuga. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. Weak men create bad times. Bad times create strong men. When you have, a really good crowning achievement of a franchise. I mean, the first trilogy of Star Wars movies. I mean, that's, bad times create strong men. Just humor me.
Yeah, those were bad times.
Yeah, bad times create strong men. That's it. That's the beginning. It's good. It's great. It's strong. And then from there, you go to the good times, the prequel trilogy.
The good times.
The good times. You get the prequel trilogy, you get the Clone Wars, you get, all sorts of media that it is just wrapped in, it's just you're getting closer and closer to the story.
Yeah.
And then you get into the weak times, which
before
is
the dark times.
You get into the bad
Empire.
times, the Disney Empire, where you have the sequel trilogy,
the Mousian Empire.
Yeah, but then we come full circle. And have you watched Andor?
No.
I love it. Kenobi, is that the Obi-Wan Kenobi? Whatever that is. It was good, but it was fancy.
I haven't watched anything Star Wars since like the second movie of the sequels came out, and I
haven't even watched it. I watched the first half hour of of episode 9.
Don't even call it that. Don't even give it.
It's not canon.
Yeah,
but anyway,
not
anyway.
Me.
So Andor is why this was a full circle thing. So in Andor, the Book of Boba Fett, the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, the Mandalorian, they're good, but they're not. They're Star Wars, but they're not great. But then it comes full circle and you get to Andor. I highly suggest you watch it because part of why you and I like the prequel trilogy is the politics, right? Andor is all politics, not a single character from the original trilogy. Only mentions of the Emperor. The whole point of the show is how a normal, average smuggler turns into a rebel agitator. And the ISB, the Imperial Security Bureau, catches wind of their activities. And, there's internal strife in the ISB of, I want these resources to go after this. You have to watch it. It's very good. But anyway, segue from that. Your point of the toys getting dumber. My girlfriend's nephew, he is 10. He likes Legos. He likes cars. And he'll play with them. But what he really does, what he really wants to do, what he wants to play with, is his iPad. Just staring at a screen for hours and hours and hours because it's been designed to keep his attention. Whereas before, we had to use our imaginations with the toys that we had. I mean, if I have a car, it's got 4 wheels, it moves. It doesn't really do anything else. But my imagination, I can have races, I can make epic car crashes and ramps and stuff like that. That's play. But with an iPad and a screen, and you're playing a game where you touch a cookie 1,000 times and get money from it, it's meaningless. It's just to hold your attention so that they can make money from you looking at the advertisements they have. And I think they're monetizing play. It's just like when we were playing, Star Wars Battlefront 1 and Star Wars Battlefront 2 and Lego Batman and Lego Star Wars. Those games, you bought the game and you played it and you played the shit out of it. It was pretty simple, but it was new and you played it and you had fun. But now, I really want that character. Mom, can I buy him?
Microtransactions.
He's $5. They're trying to extract money out of everything, and it ruins it. Because there are games that
they
aren't
refuse
even fun
to come out with a good finalized product because
it's not profitable enough.
It has to come out half baked.
Yes,
baked enough where you can consume it,
justify buying it,
and then it continuously extrapolates.
Yes,
money. Like it is sucking your bank account dry.
Yes,
I know people that have spent hundreds of dollars on Fortnite. The game was released complete and whole and everything.
Yeah.
But they keep releasing like little things.
Exactly.
And it's like, does it really up my gaming experience? And
it doesn't.
Sometimes they make it so that like they add a new weapon or something. And it's so much better than the last best weapon that now nobody is using. It's like cutting off the end of the blanket and sewing it back onto the top.
Yes.
And it's like, well, this that was really good 6 months ago is now terrible. Let me just buy the next one. And so I can still compete as if, like, there is something. They're manipulating our competitive strivalist thing. It's the apathists. They're the antithesis of the strivalists. They are manipulating...
We're going back, baby.
We're back in business. They're manipulating the natural human compulsion to strive.
Yes.
Like that is almost in the natural state of people, the biological imperative that is striving for survival, right? They are manipulating that in order to just gain profit. And what are they going to do with this profit? I don't know.
Consume other things.
Well, right, but it's like
a positive feedback.
Dan Carlin said it the best. You don't need like a secret dark room meeting with a bunch of people to have a conspiracy. It's just like interests that funnel these corporations, these CEOs, these they all get funneled into the same area because they're like, oh, well, we're all interested in the same thing. Let's just work together to do it. And it's like, it doesn't have to be a backdoor deal or anything. It just happens.
And you can see it. You know why. You know the motivation. But they add up. And in the end, it looks like a conspiracy.
Well, and then that's how you get funneled down into, like, okay, there's only like 3 oil companies. Mm-hmm. They just have Shell, ExxonMobil, and Chevron. But those are all owned by the same thing, or your news sources. You can go on to ABC or CNN or MSNBC and go into all these things, but they're all owned by the same people.
Something that I heard.
It's a false dichotomy. We have no choices. Yeah, I can choose whatever bagel I want, but it's like you're getting a bagel.
Well, just buy the everything bagel. But no, something I heard.
Interesting.
That really,
Interesting. It's bagels.
Yes. I wonder where those come from. But anyway, something that I heard that interests me, and it has to do with this, is that sometimes, not all the time, I don't think it's an absolute. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's an absolute. But sometimes when A, B, or C happens, and it causes X, Y, or Z, maybe it wasn't. If A causes X, Y, and Z, you don't really think it was B or C. It might be. You don't know. Because it's kind of like the opposite of the ends justify the means. Well, if the ends... How do you judge the ends?
Hold on. This is a note from...
Oh,
This is a note from November 21st, 2021, right? In this note, I only wrote 3 things, but I know exactly what I was thinking when I wrote this. And
yes.
you reminded me of this. I have 1 plus 5 equals 6. 2 plus 4 equals 6. 3 plus 3 equals 6. We know that 6 is here.
Yes.
We know the effect, but we have no idea what the causes are.
Right,
of
and
things. It could be
it's
any
totally
combination.
open to judge
It could be
yes.
any combination
yes.
of causes.
Look at that.
But we have the effect. Yes, great, wonderful. All right, so
that's perfect. That is perfect.
To bring it all back
best
in.
way to put that.
Back in. Let's bring it in, right? We just talked about strivalism, right? And we're talking about the implementation of technology is our underestimation of the ability of nature. We underestimate our own abilities to do something, so we implement technology in order to do it. We also think that, hey, a randomized forest of fruit trees is not efficient enough to feed us.
Right.
So we cut it all down, and then we make, like, tree farms, right? We do that, right? Like, we underestimate our own ability as well as, like, capital N nature, just everything, right, to work out issues. But they're issues specific to us, right? That's why we manipulate the environment without really a care for these other things.
Absolutely, I agree.
Right.
It needs to be, we need to have, I'm pro-human, like it all comes back to Star Wars. In the Star Wars galaxy, everything is pro-human. Humans are it, nothing else matters.
Yeah.
I'm all for that sort of thinking. But when it comes to our planet and our place in it, I'm so pro-humanist that when we go so far as to kill the planet just so we have, another 50 years of our current stagnant lifestyle, that is bad. I'm so pro-humanist that we should not do that because we want to take care of the Earth because it falls back on us.
Yeah, Mars should be an Earth 2.0. Like we
Yeah.
bring mosquitoes to Mars.
terrible.
Bring mosquitoes to Mars. Like, I know what you're thinking. We hate mosquitoes and we don't want them. We need them there. We don't know what role they play because we have the effects of the world, but we don't know what the causes are. And mosquitoes might be a huge cause.
Right.
Who knows? Well, you know what I'm saying?
I mean, whale people, mosquito people.
Mesquite. Okay, but technology simplifies everything to make the world uniform and organized, which it actually is not organized.
Right.
Think about the word organized and organic.
Organ.
It's an organ. It's part of a larger system.
Part of a whole.
So when we organize something, we're actually we're compartmentalizing and trying to define a small part and not realizing that it's of a greater system.
Right.
And so we're worried about form and function of something small, but it's function. We're worried about the form, but not the function.
Okay, so that is just that parallel right there between organization and organic. I like that right there because something that we try to do is just like you were saying with a forest of trees that bear fruit. If we try to organize this forest, we might rip all of the trees out, replant them that are genetically modified so that they'll bear bigger fruit, but we don't properly irrigate it and they all die.
Right.
It's not organic. We've organized it in the wrong way because our understanding of organization isn't actually organic or a part of a larger system. We don't think of it that way. We look at it like a painting. there are confines to it.
Right.
I'm making a picture. I have an
Yeah.
idea of the future, but only in that frame.
Yeah, it's compartmentalized, it's defined, it's abstracted only
Yes.
to our understanding, because when we abstract something, we're making it into definable terms.
Yes.
That's why I was saying, like, earlier,
Yeah.
this may have been pre-recording.
Yeah.
We're talking about the Earth, right? It's not a perfect sphere.
Right.
But in order to understand the system
Right.
that it is, we have to abstract it into a perfect sphere.
Yeah.
That way we can explain astronomical alignments
Right.
such as the equinox and the
Right.
eclipses, and it's like, oh, well, the moon also isn't perfectly, like, what is it, 24,000 miles or something like that?
I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I don't even remember what it was now, but, or 2,400, I don't remember. But anyhow, we've extrapolated and we've made perfect these numbers so that we can understand them, but we don't actually understand the significance of it being off
Yes.
by this much. Wow, okay, that's really cool.
That was a whole. We
Yeah.
struck oil there.
Yeah, so I wrote that down here.
I need to write that down.
Yeah, the implementation of technology is underestimating the ability of nature, and yes, us too, to work out issues. Technology simplifies everything to make the world uniform and organized, which is not. It's actually doing the opposite. Yeah.
The organization versus organics or
Yeah.
organic.
Yeah, we make inorganic what already was organic. We don't know how to interact with the environment in a way that benefits both. That's why when people have a they're not necessarily wrong when they say humans are parasites, but they're not exactly right either.
Right.
Because we have the ability to not be a parasite.
Right.
We just don't know
Right.
how to not be.
Like,
we don't
is
understand the system that we're in.
Is an ant, if I have ants in my house, are they parasites?
Yeah.
Sure, from my perspective, but also the ants are just doing what ants do. So
Yeah.
me defining them is within the confines of my existence.
Yeah.
But their existence is a part of a whole. They're just doing what they're doing. I left food out. It's my fault that I've got ants.
Yeah.
Do you want ants? Because this is how we get ants.
I have notes for after, but if this ever goes out, a lot of my ideas from tonight were taken from underlinings and margin, like in books, underlining and writing in the margins of books by Ernst Jünger, specifically The Worker and Glass Bees. His brother, Friedrich Georg Jünger, on literally his book was called The Failures of Technology. There was a video on YouTube by Alan Watts. How do we know we're right, or what if we're wrong? Look up that video. I'm sure you'll find it. He's in a rather strange fur coat, like sitting on a hillside, maybe in his backyard in California somewhere. And then, of course, you have the forbidden authors, Ted Kaczynski and Pentti Linkola. I call them the forbidden texts because of popular, or not popular, but he is pretty popular, I would say.
Kaczynski?
No, Chad A. Haig. He does a YouTube channel, and he featured both of these, and he calls them the forbidden texts.
Yes.
There's also a book called The Human Zoo by Desmond Morris.
I've heard of that.
It's out of print. I bought you a copy.
Oh,
it's here.
thanks.
I'll give it to you in a second. Desmond Morris, The Human Zoo. It's pretty much the same idea as the Glass Bees. It's just people are losing their connection to the world because of technology, and we're putting ourselves in a zoo.
Mm-hmm.
And then Hans Zur, Man in This World, totally hard to get a copy of physically because they stopped printing it in like the 50s, and it's never been in English again. There is on archive.com.org, whatever it is, the archive website. There's a PDF that got put on there recently, and it's just like photocopies of the actual pages of a book. But it's awesome. It's legible. Yeah. I highly encourage everyone to go read that. Those are like the main authors that I could think of off the top of my head when we came up with this, to go look back at my notes.
Yeah.
But yeah, all of those guys together question what technology is doing for us and to us.
Yeah.
And they all struggle with the idea of an equilibrium. Do you have any last notes?
No. We really hit a lot of these nails on the head today. The full circle thing, finding meaning, I think that was a very good way of describing that. I think we kind of arrived at that conclusion. This was really productive. I really enjoyed this today.
Honestly, I feel like we didn't answer the question of, like, what is the balance?
Right.
Or, like, what is it? But exploring this topic in, like, more of a metaphysical sense of, like, well, what is technology doing? Like, we're recognizing that it's harming us, but it's also effective, and, like, it's the reason for our existence. So technology, we know technology is X plus X, and we have the effect. We're looking at this finalized product, and we're like, okay, the good and the bad is to both be blamed on technology, because technology is as simple as a rock.
What's the formula for getting here, and what's the formula to get the same answer, but better?
Yeah. So we, like I was saying, 1 + 5 = 6. Well, if technology is the 1, and something that we're doing is the 5, maybe we have to, like, up the amount of technology.
Try 3 + 3.
Yeah, and, like, try something different, like rebalance it, because we still need 6. Of course you could do 0 technology and 6 and be at 6, but we're not going to be here without technology.
Right.
And so, this balance. Is there an equilibrium between human perfection and technological perfection? And in strivalism, in my own head, I have thought that being 100% perfect, you're no longer man, and you've broken strivalism. Like, you've broken the biological imperative. So the goal of the strivalist is to continuously add decimal points behind the 99.9999 and staying human, but grinding, just sharpening yourself all the time. Like, always be doing something.
Yeah.
And I think the balance is there. But where is there?
Yes. And I think my main takeaway from tonight is also just being aware, even just the awareness of this dilemma or situation or problem or however we want to tackle it, just being aware of it is enough for us to be, we just need to have that reflection. Because that's something that we take for granted. Just like when I was saying at the beginning of this, I can, if I'm dirty, I get up, I walk into the bathroom, I turn a knob to my preferred comfortable temperature, and I clean myself with a vast number of available cleansing materials, and I'm clean in the easiest, most pleasurable way possible.
Yeah.
We take that for granted, but we should be aware of that. We should be aware of the situation we find ourselves in, the pleasures and the ease with which we live life that we have. Because being aware of that opens us up to being more aware of the next technology that might come along and ruin us as a species. I mean, Elon Musk is talking about putting microchips in people's brains. You can search the internet just by blinking. I mean, that is really fucking cool, but also
terrifying.
It's terrifying. What if there's I don't know. What if one day I just execute Order 66 and my brain explodes? Wow. It's terrifying, but also the prospects of it are really cool. It's the same with artificial intelligence. That's another thing that we should talk about at some point.
Those are more books. If anyone's interested, AI, Our Final Invention, and Superintelligence by, I don't remember who they're by. I don't even know why I said that. But Superintelligence and then AI, Our Final Invention, and those are like really good books. I have like my little mini story that I've been working on for many years, which means I haven't been working on it at all. But it's about
that the story of our life.
Yeah, it's about the. Well, I'll leave it at that.
We're doing this podcast, so we're doing something.
Yeah.
Look at us being strivalists out here.
At the very minute level, we are encroaching strivalism, which is all we have to do. You just have to start.
Just start. Start somewhere.
The motivation will come after doing it. Like, you have to, in order to start getting good at working out, you just have to go work out, and the motivation will come. You just don't get motivated and then do it. You just go and do it, and motivation will come. All right, on that, bye.